start talking about the political attack on magic and magical ways of thinking and viewing the world. Have any of you guys worked with Sylvia Federici, Caliban, and the Witch? This is like a text that I carried around with me, just me in a backpack for a year. It's really important to me in my political and spiritual development. Sylvia Federici is like a serious scholar, and she works with Marx and Foucault and talks about ties in the European witch hunts with the history of the transition to capitalism, which is really important work, and she goes into all these different things that had to be trained out of humans for them to accept the new capitalist paradigm. So that's, starts with the enclosure movement. So everybody was, in Europe, it was mostly the feudal system. And the land was enclosed, and people were kicked off the land to go work in the factories. They didn't want to do that, right? So there was all this process of breaking up communities, breaking women's power in particular, breaking community power, transitioning people to clock time, bringing the idea of the body as machine. So disassociating people with their bodies, breaking people's tie with the earth, and what I want to focus on is how they systematic de-legitimization of the natural worldview. So seeing the world as full of surprises and meaning and value. So what capitalism tries to say is, okay, any tree is the same value as any other tree, and we don't want you on this land, but we'll put you on this other land that's just as valuable. And I think part of reclaiming the magical worldview for me is seeing our objects and our relationships and our bodies and our land as really sacred and special. And it's not, you can't put a dollar value on our relationships and our places. The magical worldview was really, what Sylvia Federici says is that all pre-capitalist societies have this magical worldview, and it happens in all sorts of different ways, right? There's it's very place-based and culture-based, but it's all around the world.
Well, for me, this whole thing kind of got started about 12,000 years ago when humans were kind of transitioning from hunter-gatherers to fixed settlement farmers. And that was also the time when human spirituality kind of transferred from the magical, from worshiping Mother Earth to the mainstream religions now, basically worshiping God the Father, whether it's Jesus, Mohammed, Krishna, it's worshiping the human male, who happened to also at that time be establishing the hierarchy politics and domination politics.
Yeah, I think that's another way of reading history. I think there's these different moments in which our connection to community and place and spirit have been disrupted. And I think the transition to agriculture was one of them. Transition to capitalism was another one, definitely.
And I'll just mention there's one of the authors that I read is an author by the name of Rian Eisler, who wrote a book called Chalice in the Glade about the rise of how we went from being partnership, went from being non-hierarchical partnership societies to kind of diminishing the feminine and more into patriarchy, the rise of patriarchy.
Right. Some of the really interesting stuff in Caliban and the Witch talks about the way that in the transition to capitalism, the binary gender system was really entrenched. So people were punished for being deviants from that system. People who were powerful women or feminine men or people who didn't follow these kind of new emerging gender boxes were punished, and that was part of the transition. And I think is part of the magical work that I'm doing out in Cascadia is reclaiming a queer identity through magic. And I work with the Radical Faeries out there, and this is a whole tradition that's developed around the gay man's experience. And they use a set of rituals and practices that really suit the needs of their community, and it's mostly focused around the individual and healing the wounds of society on people who've been told not to express themselves fully, and that they're not beautiful in the way they are, and that their bodies are bad. So a lot of their magic is about being fabulous and being empowered to use their voice. And that's really connected really well with the witch magic, which I'm working with Evelyn and Paul has also worked with. So the witch magic, which I work with, which comes out of the reclaiming tradition, comes out of the radical feminist movement in San Francisco Bay Area. Is working with reclaiming European ancestral traditions and tying them into this new place, and creating a kind of place-based spirituality, drawing on what we can draw on of what we know of our ancestors and what we know of this new place. Which brings me to, I think it's really important to talk about cultural appropriation. Because it's this fine line between, on the West Coast we have a lot of indigenous, thriving indigenous culture, and being a settler person or being of the ancestry of the colonizers it's hard to know how to be respectful and responsible in that way. So my ancestors are from Ireland and England and Germany, and have decided that I'm not going back there. That's not my place. And so I have to be somewhere in the world because I exist. And so one of the things that's come up in our relationships with local indigenous groups is the sweat lodge ceremonies. So we have a relationship with the local indigenous man who holds sweat lodge ceremonies on the land that I live on. And a lot of white folks do participate in these sweat lodge ceremonies, and there's dissent in the indigenous community. There's not a consensus, I'd say, in the local indigenous community about bringing white folks into the ceremony. One of them said, this conversation that we've been having, why don't those folks respect themselves enough to have their own ceremonies? And that's a message that's come through the Hopi prophecies as well, that don't try to be Hopi-like. You need to have your own ceremonies. You need to be earth-based ceremonies. Build your own tradition. So that's the work. That's the work that we're trying to do, and we're trying to connect to this idea of being people of place and people of long-standing traditions, and we're new at it. I think it's important that we figure out how to have an interfaith consensus. So pre dominant religion, there was
What do you mean by predominant religion?
I mean, well, I've been
Do you mean like Paleolithic religions?
I've been putting this in the context of like pre-capitalism, but then also we talked about pre-agriculture. So like these two moments of shifts. I think that the magical communities are important. One, I think that the sort of spiritual framework can give us a kind of broader perspective of what activism can mean. You know, activism is not just like going to organizing meetings and planning events and outreach and stuff like that. It's like building entire like communities. So, you know, we need childcare, we need folks who are doing healing work, we need folks who are cooking, and doing all the, you know, our communities are broader than just organizers. So that's one thing that's important to me. I started as an activist before I was a magical activist. And one of the things I noticed was that we were like fighting all the time. We were like pushing all the time. It was like, and I burned out, you know, because we were like always going for it and always angry and always challenging what was happening, and we didn't like encourage each other to develop our creative like talents, and we didn't you know, value self-care and stuff like that. So you know, I think a lot of the things that magic brings are already being integrated into the activist culture in other ways, and I think that building our activism in spiritual community can bring more diversity to what it means to be activists. And so what I saw in my transition, or the moment when this became important to me, I was traveling in Ireland and just looking for couch surf, you know. So I ended up in this land occupation outside of Dublin, and these folks were occupying this land, which was the Hill of Tara, which is where the Irish kings were crowned. You know, they're chosen by the people democratically. And it was a very, very spiritual place with deep historical roots. There's a road being built through. And part of building the road was digging up ancient burial grounds and thus, you know, removing the history from this place. And so people, I came right after the direct action camp had been raided. So it was like there'd been a direct action camp and like the spiritual camp, the spiritual historical camp. The direct action camp and the spiritual camp had just merged, so everybody was there. And I saw in this place, there was a raid right after I got there, and I really saw how folks were able to let go what was extra, you know. So I don't think they would have won if they had battled. So they pulled back, and the cops came and dismantled the shitter and these winter structures and stuff like that. But then there was a sacred fire, and the people knew, you know, it was like, this is a sacred fire. I'm not giving up the sacred fire. It's sacred, you know. So everything else was like could go away, and this couldn't. So what I saw there was one, how the deep historical connection to land and spiritual connection to land really gave power to their activism, and two, how they, part of their power was being able to step back and step forward, and I think that's really important. So another thing that I came here to talk about is that I'm studying astrology, and I'm a scientist too. I'm a mathematician, and so you know, empirical evidence is really important to me. So this is the book that I'm working with. Richard Tarnas has tracked planetary cycles through time, along with historical cycles. And so one of the things that he's found is that these two planets, these two outer planets, Pluto and Uranus, when they're in a hard relationship to each other, so when they're in conjunction to each other, when they're 90-degree angle with each other, 180-degree angle, those are times of global upheaval and transformation and change. So that accompanied 1960 to 72, in the 30s, the French Revolution, all these times, and we're just getting into it right now. So part of the message that I want to bring is that we're in this revolutionary moment, and we have this revolutionary energy behind us, and I think we can choose how we're going to use that energy. And I think it's important to know how long it's going to be here, how long we're going to have that, because it's not going to be forever. So we're in a phase kind of peaking from 2012 to 2015, right? It travels in a little curve like that. So the sphere of influence is about from 2007 to 2020, peaking in 2012 to 2015. And we're having the exact squares, series of exact squares from 2012 to 2015. And it seems to me that the influence peaks kind of, or the effects that we see kind of happen after the peaks. So I think that that we're going to be feeling it really profoundly from 2012 to 2018, 2020, and then we're going to have a period of contraction. So we gotta take good care of ourselves and like really pace our work, I think. And hopefully this is helpful in folks for thinking about how to engage in the revolutionary struggle. I think for me, part of what I feel like my role is really like intellectualizing the spirit work. I'm privileged kind of in the society in that way that I have like deeply intellectual engagement, and that is why I was like so shy of really stepping into this spirit work. Kind of once I was politically active, and so I think a lot of the people that I'm in community with are not very intellectual people. They really like feel the spirit, or they like maybe they have like qualities that would get them labeled as like as mentally unstable, or that's like that's not a logical thing or feeling, or like the thing that you see is like not real or whatever. So we have different kinds of engagement, and I think that the intellectual engagement, I hope, is a way to bridge, because that's how I came in, was seeing in practice like how this is affected. Well, one of the pieces that I love about the Unitarian tradition is that anything can be a text of spirit, and so I think like a tree or dogs having sex or like anything is like a text of like truth from the earth. And I think when we're really listening to the world around us, that is like those are can be our texts and can be the source of engagement and learning. I'd like to say, and then give you both a chance, that I think in the community that I'm a part of, because we're honoring what we talked about is this like diversity of community roles. There's some folks who are doing organizing, and so the organizing is secular, right? So we have like this spiritual community that's allowing folks to go out and do this secular work and bring the kind of a lot of the practices that we're doing out there. So translating the kind of communication tools and the like, it's like a lot of the tools for like holding ritual, you can use for a meeting, and it's secular, and it helps to kind of move the energy of a group. I think that magic can really work with Marxist dialectical materialism. So you have like, and you've got like these ideas bouncing around each other in the group. I think that a lot of the tools that we work with to like shift group consciousness and like build trust, and allow ourselves to transform our opinions and our feelings can be really useful in activist groups from moving from like a sort of group conflict to a kind of revolution. space, and I think that the spiritual group that I work in has gotten a lot of respect because of some of our members who are really active in the Portland organizing, and are not being woo all over the place or whatever, but are really like respected members of the local organizing. I think building trust is really important, and meeting people where they're at is part of how we're not recruiting people to come into our community at this point. It's like it's something that people are drawn to because it's powerful, and I think that having personal spiritual traditions and like rituals and ways to stay grounded and take care of yourself is important, and I think that having people that we do it with is so important. So I wanted to share a magical object, which is the collective tarot deck. I don't know if anybody's seen this. The tarot comes out of Europe and Northern Africa, and this deck has been reimagined by a group of artists in Portland with a kind of activist and queer lens, and it's important. It's important to me in my work and my personal work and group work, and so there's like 72 cards, and they all have a different archetypal meaning, and the idea is that the span of the cards encompasses the span of archetypal possibility, and they can be used in all sorts of different ways to seek advice or understanding or whatever. And so pass them around. Let's see if we can get this. It's called a collective